Hey, YouTube theologians, Pastor Wolfmueller here. Sunday drive home, although it's not Sunday. I'm not driving home, but driving around in the car is a boring title. I am thinking about, this Sunday I dropped into our high school Sunday school class, and they were reflecting on the sixth commandment, you shall not commit adultery. And it occurred to me that there are two ways that this commandment is attacked, two distinct battles that we have to fight for chastity. I want to talk about that. But some of you are saying, wait a minute, sixth commandments, you shall not steal. That means you've got the wrong numbering. Wrong might be strong. But remember, the Reformed and the Lutherans have a different numbering of the 10 Commandments. It's so frustrating that we have this, but oh well. See previous video about that particular topic. What we're talking about here is the you shall not commit adultery, which is the Lord's command that we would be chaste and pure in thought, word, and deed, that husband and wife would love and honor one another, and that the Christian church would be committed to the good of intimacy in marriage. The old picture of this, which I think is so helpful, is that intimacy, the act of marriage, the particular love that husband and wife have for one another, etc., is like a fire, which if it's in the hearth, it's great. But if it's anywhere else in the house, it's terrible. So that it's good, but it needs to be in the proper place. And if it's not in the proper place, there's a lot of bad places for there to be a fire. You can have a fire in the kitchen. You can have a fire in the living room. You can have a fire in the closet, in the garage, in the attic. Wherever you have a fire is bad unless you have a fire in the fireplace. So it is with this gift of man and woman together. It is to be in the right place. And we are called to confess that. Now, the world, our own flesh, and the devil absolutely hate that. It's the animosity that is put at that commandment, the hatred, the violence that's put at that commandment, you shall not commit adultery, is really profound. And it is the place that the church, I think, is most being persecuted in our own day, because the church says that marriage is a man and a woman. For example, that the church says that intimacy belongs only to marriage, that the church says that marriage is, among other things, for the gift of children and procreation, and that intimacy has that telos, that end, that goal of having children. Wow, the world hates all of that stuff. And so the church is considered hateful. Because we confess marriage. Now, this is what I realized, this clarity in the high school Sunday school class this weekend, and that is that on the first temptation is that we would not be chaste, that we would have impure thoughts, that we would have impure speech, that we would have impure acts, and that we would dishonor the Lord's gift of marriage and intimacy by our own defilement of it and misuse of it. And that's normally what we think of when we think of breaking the sixth commandment, sexual immorality. It's doing something, acting in a sexual way that's not authorized by the Lord and by His commandment. And that certainly is true. We are tempted to sexual immorality in all these different ways. Jesus says, for example, if you lust after a woman, you've committed adultery. If you lust in your heart, you've committed adultery. So that even the mental breaking of the commandments, or even the coarse jesting that Paul talks about, this is all breaking the sixth commandment. So we want to pursue chastity. I, by the way, prefer that language of chastity over abstinence, because it gives us something to go after. It's not just not doing something, but it's something to pursue. We're pursuing the virtue of chastity. But the other battleground, as I was looking around this high school Sunday school class, what I realized that one of the real fights that they have to face is not that they would act in a sexually immoral way, but they would be tempted to deny the Lord's gift of marriage. That they're going to have friends who have committed their lives and wrapped up their identity to a form of sexual immorality. It could be fornication, intimacy before marriage. It could be lewdness. It could be homosexuality. It could be, and I think that transgenderism is a little bit skewed to this, but it could be that as well. That's this confusion of man and woman. That they're going to have friends and family, all of us, who are marriage heretics, who confess the lie about marriage. Not what the scriptures teach about what marriage is, but some other doctrine. And we're going to be invited to join in the lie. In other words, you could be as pure and holy in your own life in regards to the sixth commandment as, I don't know, you could be pure and holy. No comparison here. You could keep the sixth commandment perfectly if you could do that. But we're going to be tempted to deny marriage by our confession, by the invitation to the two guys who are going to act like they're getting married, or whatever it is. And that is also a temptation to sin against the sixth commandment. In other words, we're going to be tempted to break the sixth commandment by act, word, thought, deed. We're also going to be tempted to break the sixth commandment by confession. And this is the pressure that's coming hard on the church. Not to be sexually immoral, but to confess sexual immorality. Now, first of all, we can't do it. We can't participate in the lie. We can't let marriage be anything other than what God has determined it to be. And not just because that's right, it is, but also because it's what's best. And any distortion or change or perversion or adjustment or reworking of marriage is worse than what God has given. So we have to look at our day and all of the heresies that the church is faced with, and we have to see this big one, the heresy of marriage, and we have to call it what it is. It's not going to be easy, but we better know that it's not going to be enough to just live a chaste and decent life in what we think and say and do. We're going to have to also confess what marriage is, and put forth, and may God grant us by His Spirit and Word the wisdom and strength to do this, to put forth in our own families, in our own confession, even in our own art and poetry, to put forth the beautiful picture of husband and wife, of man and woman bound together by God. The two become one, and the fruitfulness that comes from it, and the joy that comes from it, so that the truth is also presented with a compelling beauty. Now, that does not mean, again, that this is going to be easy. And when you and I stand up to confess that marriage is man and woman, bound together by God until death parts them, for the purpose of help and delight in children, the world is going to go berserk. I mean, all the marriage heresies are essentially destructive. It's fire outside the hearth. So we're ready for well, I suppose we ought to be ready for the wrath of the world and the flesh and the devil to come after us. But the Lord is the one who gave Eve to Adam, the same who died on the cross for us. And the Christian knows that he knows best. So may God grant us to be faithful to this commandment, both in our own lives and also in our confession. You shall not commit adultery. God grant it for Christ's sake. Sunday Drive.